The South, the people and social hierarchy. Why did the South remain so loyal to slavery? Part of the answer to that question lies in the growth of the Southern economy after the invention of the cotton gin. The South produced just 3,000 bales of cotton in 1790, but the cotton gin caused production to soar to more than 4 million bales a year by the 1860s. Slavery also helped Northern industries thrive. Factories needed raw materials like cotton produced in the South. The South prospered, but its wealth was very unequally distributed. The millions of slaves who produced a good portion of the nation's wealth were not able to improve their situations. Although unrealistic, poor Southern whites envisioned a day when they might rise enough in the world to own slaves of their own. Two-thirds, or 67%, of white households in the South did not own any slaves at all. Distribution of wealth in the South became less democratic over time. Fewer whites owned slaves in 1860 than in 1840. So, a few highlights from this reading are: the first, connection to the Northern economy. Although the North did not have slavery, it indirectly benefited from the slavery in the South. Next, the point about social mobility. Enslaved people and poor Southern whites were not really able to work their way up in society. There was not an upward social mobility. And finally, the note that not all whites owned slaves. Actually, most whites did not own slaves. Next portion. White Southerners understood that their economy needed cotton, whether they owned slaves or not. They also knew that cotton planters needed slave labor to grow their profitable crop. The prospect of owning slaves became less likely for anyone with few or no slaves. This was because the price of slaves rose with their demand. High prices created different outcomes for the men and women trapped in slavery. As prices went up, slaves became more valuable to their owners. At the same time, the rising value of their slaves made slaveholders less willing to listen to talk of ending slavery. In their eyes, freeing their slaves could only mean one thing: utter financial ruin. At the top of Southern white society stood the planter elite. Below the wealthy planters were the yeoman farmers, or small landowners. Below the yeomen were poor landless whites. These landless whites dreamed of owning land and slaves. In the South, living the American dream meant possessing slaves, producing cotton, and owning land. So, highlights from this section include a reiteration. Here is a repeat of a previous point that there was no upward social mobility for poor whites. And it became even more difficult over time for them to own slaves because the value of slaves was rising. And the second point is the planter elite was not interested in hearing about ending slavery because it would mean financial ruin. They would be negatively impacted financially if slavery went away. On this next slide here, we have highlights of what that second paragraph was about. It's the same information, just in a visual format. So we have the planters at the top, the small landowners, or yeomen are the small farmers. And then we have the landless people, or poor farmers. They're also called tenant farmers. And then we have the enslaved at the bottom. So the group at the top, which is the smallest group, has all the power and money in the South.